I think that baking, I really do believe is that baking is love made visible and that it's the ultimate therapy. And I think that people who get to have the pleasure of working with dough, it's almost like artists that get to work with clay. And we have that sensory aspect that's part of it, and it helps us to work out all the quirks, helps us to work out all of the emotions, and really just to achieve a wonderful psychological state. So I love the kneading and the whole process of the dough. And I also enjoy working with children and passing these traditions on. And I notice sometimes when you work with the kids, you bring them into the kitchen and you say, hey, how are you today? And they say, oh, good, everything's okay. Then you start working the dough. And they start to open up a little bit. About 10 minutes in, everything comes out, like the biggest problem in life, what's hurting on their heart. And the same thing with adults. And I think, what a beautiful thing to just get people into the kitchen to have this therapy. I was blessed to be raised that way, but for those who aren't, it's a wonderful tool that we have at our hands. So the Mediterranean lifestyle and the diet, is really a lifestyle. And it's much more than just the nutrients, but it's also the way that the food is enjoyed and the way that things are shared and the way that we enjoy the time at the table and the time in the kitchen. And so that's part of what makes it healthy, and that's what I'll talk about today. So it's very informal. I've got a 20-minute presentation. If you all have any questions, at the end, we'll go over all of them. No questions are too great. Some of the material might be a repeat of what you've heard since you've been here. Some might be new. So feel free. All questions or discussions are up for grabs. And if there's something I have left out, please, let me know. So I wanted to talk about authentic Neapolitan pizza and its role in the Mediterranean diet. We think about diet and pizza don't normally go hand in hand. So we're gonna talk about why that doesn't have to be true. But the first thing I wanted to do is to start out with some facts. So Italian food is now currently the #1 cuisine in the United States and the #1 cuisine in the world. And believe it or not, more Americans eat more pizza, because it's not all of the real pizza, but they eat a lot of what they call pizza, per person than we do in Italy nowadays. And pizza is even served to the American troops a lot of times on July 4th at different places that they're stationed. So it's an emblem of Napoli. It's an emblem of the Italian culture, but it's also become very important in the American culture. And believe it or not, a third of the Italian foods that are eaten in the United States are imported from Italy. And about 2/3 are also made up of like the Grande products and a lot of people who are doing artisan foods right here for us. So what I'm going to discuss today, and what you've obviously learned because you've had your hands in it, but for our guests, you all weren't here the other days, were you Tuesday or Wednesday? Okay, so for our guests, I'm going to go briefly over, what real pizza is and what makes it authentic and that kind of thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of pizza, and we'll talk about the health benefits, and then we'll talk about the role of the pizza in the Mediterranean diet. So the first thing is the tomato. A lot of people associate Italian food with the tomato, but we didn't have the tomato pre-Columbus. So tomato is a new world food from Latin America, like potatoes, like corn, like chocolate, peppers, so many things that if you go to the part of Italy that my family's from in Calabria and tell them no peppers, no tomatoes, they'll look at you like you're crazy. But a couple hundred years ago, we did not have them. So these are new world products that we integrated into making the pizza. And you can look at some of these old cookbooks that they have from Naples. If you look for one 18th century cookbook called Il Cuoco Galante, you can find the first mention ever of the tomato and the basis of what tomato sauce was and what pizza was back in those days. So he declared that the tomato was used to top the pizza and the pasta, and he actually gave a description of how that should be done in this very, very early cookbook. Now, what's interesting is pizza was always a street food. It was never a royal food, never something that was eaten in the palaces. But the writers, the cookbook writers in those days were the scholars. They were not the cooks. They were very separated from what was going on in the kitchen. So I find it interesting that this is a street food, but like they knew enough to talk about it very early on and give it some importance. So, 1492, 15th, 16th century, it took quite a while before that plant that was used as an ornament in Spain got to be introduced and used in Italy in the food. So the pizza margherita, of course we get it from the name Regina Margherita or Queen Margherita, and it's named because when the royal family was visiting Naples, they made this pizza for her with the colors that look like the Italian flag. So the tomatoes to represent the red, and the white to represent the mozzarella, and the green to represent the basil. And that's how we ended up with that particular pizza, which became the most famous one today. And the first pizzerias were born in the 20th century in Naples. So this became quite of a thing, but it was when the Bourbons were in power in the very early 18th century that one of the kings actually wanted to go into one of the pizzeria and eat, and then it became a socially acceptable thing that everyone could do. Before that, it was kind of, culturally, it was much more a street food. It definitely was not something that the elite would want to do. But this time in the 18th century really revolutionized pizza eating in Italy, because now it's something everybody does. It's a classless food. You know, it's no matter where you're from, this is a food that you can enjoy. So for those of you who took the certification, already you know about Antonio Pace in 1984 and the development of the authentic Neapolitan pizza and the association of the Verace pizza Napolitana and what that means. But this standardization of food in Italy is nothing new. It's something that they've always done, and it's something that all countries can benefit from, and it's something that we're going to be seeing more and more in the world and more in the United States. So there's a term called GI, which not your kind of GI, Ranger Jones, but GI meaning geographic indicators, which is the food that, like the DOP, that tells us these are protected denomination of origin, wines, foods, things like that. Here in America, we have the Idaho potatoes as one of them, wild Maine blueberries. So as we use these products and benefit, you know, the ones that are authentic, it really gives a boost to the economy depending upon where you're from, and it ensures that the product is true. So when you're looking at a product from a nutritional standpoint, if you know for sure that the ingredient has used a certain type of milk and that it's been heated to a certain temperature and that it's been held a certain way, it loses a certain amount of its moisture and it's standardized, then you can tell how nutritious it is. If we leave anybody up to make whatever kind of mozzarella they want and whatever kind of tomato they want, it's much harder to analyze it, and it's not only for the taste, but also for the nutritional benefits. So this becomes very, very important, and also for maintaining the traditions. And that's why pizza means what it does in Italy, and pizza means what it does in the United States, because these traditions were maintained. Even before they were standardized, they were still maintained. So for our masters already, they know about the water and the ingredients, you know, starting just with the ingredients of the pizza, the water, that it must be clean and not carbonated. It must have a pH balance of between 6 and 7. Now, I teach a lot of culinary medicine classes, so we talk about food and how they heal the body. And one of the things we can tell when people aren't healthy is their body will have a high acidic state. So like fried foods, meats, alcohol, those things really give us a higher acidic level in our blood, and that's not what we want. We want to try to have neutral. So if we already start out with a water that's very close to neutral, that gives us a good base for the ingredients. And also this water will have a lot of calcium in it, which is also good, so another nutrient. So it sounds like, you know, it's a little trivial thing, water is water, and flavor is one thing, the way that it reacts to the dough and the yeast, but also for nutrition reasons, it's very important to start with a good water in terms of the pizza. And the other thing is the flour. So I'm sure you all use the 00 flour in making the pizza. So, you know, a lot of times we have villainized flour in the United States. It's actually National Flour Month, by the way, but because a lot of people have celiac disease and have issues with gluten intolerance, and some of the flours are modified, it's really gotten a bad name. But traditionally made this way, the flour and the carbohydrates in the pizza were actually a good thing because they gave the body energy and minerals and things like that. Nowadays, we think of flour as a poor food. You know, we think of this as the cucina povera or anything that's made with flour. But it's important to remember that even up until like 100 years ago in Italy, the peasants couldn't afford the flour. Wheat was very expensive. And since the days of the Roman, it was taxed very heavily. So you had to be from the upper class to be able to afford the wheat to begin with. So this idea of wheat being cheap and wheat the way it is, this is a very new thing. And in the days when pizza was invented, it definitely was not that way. And I heard you guys talked a lot about salt, you know, when you were making the mozzarella, and we talked about which kinds of salt do better in the dough of the pizza and also in the mozzarella. So are we using kosher salt today? And in the pizza dough, in the certified one, they're always using sea salt. So I'd like to talk a little bit about salt because, you know, you guys are cooks and you all are interested in health. And salt's an important topic because sodium gets a bad rap. But you know, we need sodium, a certain amount of sodium in our bodies to live. Like it's an essential mineral and it helps with our nerve function. So we can't go without sodium, like just because yes, there is a hypertension link, but also you need a little bit. So there are also some tricks when you look at sodium, and which can be good for the body and which can't. I did a thing on Channel 7 a couple months ago on salt. You can Google my name and Channel 7, it will come up for the full story. But basically what I want to talk about, the benefits of sea salt, because they have a lot of magnesium and potassium. So about 2 months ago, there was a study where they had two control groups of people. I'll just use you guys as an example. So you all were a group who were thin, you were healthy, and they gave you had no hypertension, no problems, and they gave you a low sodium diet. You all in this group were overweight, you all had hypertension, and they gave you a high sodium diet, okay? But here's the trick. They gave this group also the mineral of magnesium to go along with it. This group, they did not. At the end of the study, you'd be surprised, it was actually this group that did better. They were already unhealthy and they had a high sodium diet. But because they had magnesium supplements, the magnesium helped to counter-effect the negative effects of the sodium. So this group did poorer. Now the neat thing about sea salt is it automatically has magnesium and potassium in it. So if you ever get the chance to make the decision as a chef and as a cook to be able to decide what kind of salt, it's not so much more to use unrefined sea salt. You can get a bottle like this, even retail price is like $2. So if you can use unrefined sea salt, it still has magnesium, it still has potassium in it, and that will help people to be able to eat sodium, to enjoy it, but not to have the negative effects of the hypertension. Unfortunately, what happens with table salt is they take all the nutrients out, right? They strip it as refined, so they take the nutrients out, they add it in iodine, which is good. But you can get iodine from other sources, and then they add in some other chemicals. So the body doesn't know what to do with those chemicals. The body doesn't have the magnesium and the potassium, which is like the base nutrients needed in everything. And that's what gives us the problem. So sea salt gives us flavor, kosher salt gives us flavor, and anything we can get that's unrefined is really, really good in the world of salt. And also, we were talking about today about, which pizza with the cheese seemed a little bit saltier, which one needed more salt, needed less. The salt levels in our body, or the cortisol levels in our body, cortisol is a stress hormone. And it's like the fight or flight hormone. So when we're stressed, whether it's emotional, physical, whatever, the hormones raise, and we need more salt. I can always tell myself when I'm stressed out, I'm doing too much, working too hard, because I'll crave like that really thick salt, like on pretzels and things. That's a little indicator. People who are in that state will always want more salt. Maybe they're a marathon runner, a construction worker, need more salt. However, if you're very peaceful and you're calm and you're not doing hard work, like a monk would probably have a lower cortisol level, would need lower salt. So I get beat up a lot of times in my cookbook. They always say, why don't you tell us exactly the amount of salt that you need? And I said, because when we say to taste, we're not being difficult. It's because different people have different taste values. So that's the idea behind the salt as well. And we'll talk a little about yeast. So nobody, we don't hear so much about yeast anymore. It's not like a superfood, nobody's using it. But I actually went to a lecture at the Egyptian embassy here in DC about 5 years ago, where there was a doctor who actually was using yeast as a way to kill cancer cells. And he had all this proof of how the yeast kills the cancer cells. So good quality yeast is really important. A lot of times you'll hear people talk about the lievito madre or mother yeast, which people are doing on their own, which is absolutely a wonderful, beautiful tradition. But if you're using chemical yeast, like a baker's yeast, it has these compounds in it which help to support immunity. And they're the beta-1,3 glucans. That's what they're called. So these beta-1 glucans are not found in a lot of other substances. You can get the supplement at Vitamin Shop, or you can use it in the yeast and in the bread and things like that and get it from that variety. So something which helps boost immunity in our body. And of course, with everything nowadays, we can use as much immunity helping as boosting as possible. But I'm going to talk about the two kinds of main mozzarellas that we use in the pizza. So this is the mozzarella di bufala, or the buffalo mozzarella, and then we're going to talk about the cow milk mozzarella. But this mozzarella, the mozzarella di bufala con panna, DOP, these are all of the nutritional analysis of it. So this milk is a very, very rich milk. It has, for about 100 grams, which is 3.5 ounces, 264 calories. It has 16.2 grams of protein. That's a lot of protein for a non-meat. 0.4 carbohydrate, 20 grams of fat. So it's a lot of fat, but you get a lot of bang for your buck with that type of fat. And also 320 milligrams of phosphorus, which is not easily found, and 245 milligrams of calcium. So that's almost half the amount of phosphorus that we need per day just in the buffalo milk mozzarella, just in one serving. And then a third of the calcium. The buffalo milk mozzarella is easily digested. It has a lower level of lactose for people who are lactose intolerant than cow's milk. It also has low cholesterol. It has B1, B2, B6, B-niacin. So all of those great nutrients that help us against stress and with energy, especially like in the kitchen. We should all be taking more B vitamins because we need them. And then we have the cow's milk cheese. So the mozzarella that's made from cow's milk is also a wonderfully pretty lean, pretty low sodium cheese in terms of the whole range of cheeses. If you look at all of them, mozzarella is a good option to have. So 60 calories, 6 grams of protein per serving, 3.5 grams of fat, of which only 2.5 are saturated. So that's a very good lower amount of fat. Only 10 grams of cholesterol, 40 grams of sodium, 0 carbohydrates, and 80 grams of calcium. So the cow milk mozzarella is still a great choice. We talked today a little bit about the difference between the fior di latte and the regular mozzarella. Also, these are rich in biotin, riboflavin, niacin, protein, phosphorus, and the D, E, and A vitamins as well. And then we come to the tomatoes. So to be the authentic, Neapolitan pizza, we have to use a certain type of tomato. So we have the San Marzano, that's DOP. We have the Pomodorini di Corbara, which is also a great product. The Pomodorino del Pianeno del Vesuvio, which is DOP. So Vesuvio, you all know about the volcano, right? Vesuvius. So, we think about this thing, there's a lot of marketing done that things are grown around Naples at the base of Vesuvius, or that they're grown around Sicily at the base of Mount Etna. And you're like, big deal. Is that just a marketing thing? Like, it's cool, it's by a volcano? But yeah, it is a good marketing thing, but it's actually really true because that soil is so nutrient rich from the ash from the volcano that it makes everything grow better. So you cannot compare a tomato like this, even one that I grow in my garden, which I really am proud of them, but that soil, you just cannot compare the quality and the richness and the nutrients that are in that soil from the volcano. So many of our products that we got, whether tomato from a New World, pepper from the New World, a grape from Greece, lemons from North Africa, whenever we got these ingredients and we put them at the base of volcanoes, I'm taking credit like as if I was there at that time, put them at the base of volcanoes, they really got better. So you can look at like a little dock lemon that grows in North Africa that we originally got in Italy. When they planted them, the lemons became like this. I mean, they look like grapefruit, and it's all the work of the volcano, all the beautiful work of Mother Nature. So these products really are superior in terms of nutrients and in terms of flavor, if we can get them. If we can't get them, okay, the best quality tomato, we can buy. But the lycopene that's in the tomato is a really powerful antioxidant, and the tomato is one of the only places that it's prevalent in. So Italians were voted the healthiest people in Europe last year, believe it or not, despite the fact that we eat pizza mostly all the time and pasta every day. Still healthiest people in Europe, and a lot of people credit lycopene as one of the reasons for that. Another great reason for that is the olive oil. So olive oil is my very favorite ingredient, and if I had to ever be reincarnated into a food product, I would be olive oil, because I just think it's such an amazing product. My fourth book was called The Ultimate Mediterranean Diet Cookbook, and I had to have all the latest research of the Mediterranean food and the Mediterranean diet in that book. And the amount of olive oil research was so disproportionate to everything else in the book that I'm actually doing a new book. They kicked some of it out, and I'm doing another book just on olive oil to put it. But these are all of the things that olive oil can help. So there's a saying in Italian that the production of olive oil isn't just a career, it's a tradition. And the olive isn't just a fruit, but it's a relic, like a national treasure. Here we have, prevents the formation of blood clots, lowers total blood cholesterol, boosts the immune system against the negative effects of toxins, helps against microorganisms, parasites, preventing risk of memory loss, any types of brain problems from trauma, rheumatoid arthritis, reduces the risk of different types of cancer. All of these products, because mainly different reasons. One, it's an anti-inflammatory, and one, it has wonderful nutrients in it and wonderful antioxidants. So we're going to talk a little bit more about those, because how do you know if what you're using is a good olive oil? Unfortunately, they're not all the same. There's a lot of what we call corrupt olive oil out there, and people who are making money off people who don't know the difference, which most of our market doesn't know the difference. So they're selling things with a high price, a beautiful label. They're getting a lot of money for it, and it's not doing us any good. And we're thinking that it's doing all of that. So maybe there's a little bit of placebo effect there, but if we want to really make sure we're getting the good olive oil for our customers, for our bodies, for our flavor, for whatever we're doing, these are some of the things that we can look at. So the first thing you want to think about with olive oil is the virginity, right? Everybody knows extra virgin olive oil is a good thing. But what we don't know is that in our culture and in our current society, we're not doing anything a lot of times to test the virginity of the olive oil. So a corrupt producer can have an extra virgin olive oil. It says extra virgin right on there, it looks pretty, it's expensive, but it's not extra virgin. So it's not doing you any good. The real marker for the virginity in the olive oil is the acidity rate. So 0.8% acidity or less means that it's extra virgin. So if someone can test that for you, it's good. So if you get a supplier in who gives you an extra virgin olive oil, he can tell you, or she, that it's 0.4% or this percent, that's wonderful. They've done the work because they've proven that percentage. They might not have proved, someone might not have proven extra virgin, but they'll prove the percentage. The other good thing we need to know about olive oil is the age. So in Italian we say olio nuovo, vino vecchio, which means new oil, old wine. So just like you want to age the wine because it gets the characteristics and all this, it's the opposite with oil. The sooner, the closer to the pressing you can get it, the more nutrients it's going to have, the more flavor it's going to have, the better it's going to be for you. The olive oil won't go bad. You know, if you keep it cool in a cool place, it's not going to go bad for like a year, at least, maybe even longer. But it's going to start losing a lot of its nutrients after like 3 months. So for health reasons, the quicker you can eat it, the better. For all of those other things we named before. Then you want to know about cultivars. So cultivar is the word that we use to describe the varieties of olive. There are 880 different varieties of olives that we know about on the market today. We probably in our lives only use a couple handfuls of them, even if we're big connoisseurs. But all of those cultivars have different flavor. And all of them have different level of nutrients, and all of them have different color oil and different benefits to them. And they're grown in different places. So nowadays we do things like we take cultivar from Spain, we bring it to California. We take one from Morocco and we bring it to Greece. We take one from Greece, we bring it to Italy. You can bring the cultivars from different places and grow them, but they all have their indigenous home of where they were from. And olive oil is kind of like wine in that you have a terroir. So, you know, I go to Italy a lot with the Italian trade agency. And last year I went to 2 different conferences specifically about olive oil. And there we're pairing everything, every dish that we make with a wine and with an olive oil. So that's the new trend. Like 10 years from now, you're going to be, pizza is very popular, even in Italy with beer. Everybody drinks pizza with beer. But beyond that, we're going to be pairing each dish with a specific olive oil, with a specific wine, talking about why. Which flavors, we professionally taste the flavors. I have a YouTube video if you all want to learn how to do this. And we taste the flavors and we see, this notes that pairs best with this and that kind of thing. All olives, see the color of these olives that are like, there's a little bit green there. I'll come over so you can see this one is a good example. He's a little green and then he goes to black. So all olives are born that green color, hence the term olive green, and they all dye black. Some taste better green, some taste like the Sicilian colossal olive is always green. Sometimes the nocellara can be green. The black, like the kalamata from Greece, they always go black. And they taste different. Different ones taste better at different times. Different ones make different oil at different times. So I like to mention that because some people think there's different. Some olives are green, some olives are black. No, they all age and mature differently. And then the next thing you need to know about are the antioxidants. So the antioxidants in olive oil are called polyphenols. The polyphenols are the same antioxidants that are in red wine that make it good for us. So like when they say red wine's good for your heart, that's those polyphenols that are in the olive oil. And polyphenols are so important because they go into our body like scavengers and they get rid of all the bad stuff. So as many polyphenols as we can get, the better that will be to help all of those things that I mentioned in the other slide. Now, on the scale, a modern scale of polyphenols, the olive oil could go from 0 to 900. So the higher close to 900 you go, the more polyphenols it has. How do we, as lay people, as chefs, as home cooks, know when an olive oil has polyphenols? Well, one of the easy home tests that you can do just for yourself is to see the burn when the olive oil goes down. So when we taste the oil, you want to heat it up in a cobalt blue glass, like the color of Rob's shirt, because you don't want to be biased by the color. In the olden days, green olive used to be better than gold because it meant it was full of fruit and it was fresh. Nowadays, people are adding chlorophyll to make it green, so you can't use that anymore. So you don't want to look at the color, but you look at the aroma, and you taste it. When you taste it, you make this funny slurping sound. You're actually slurping it back to your taste buds here. Because what happens when they go here, in about 20 seconds, you're gonna start to feel a burn. And that peppery burn is the polyphenols doing their job. So if you're slurping an olive oil the way I told you, and you're just not getting anything, you might as well be using butter. you want to have that. If you're using it for health reasons, you want to have the polyphenols. And usually the stronger flavored ones, like that would pair with a good pizza, like that would pair with a good tomato sauce, those are going to have lots of polyphenols to them. Olive oil in the cooking and the smoke point, how many of you have heard you can't fry in olive oil? Right? 2 hands. If you had a penny for every time you heard you can't fry in olive oil, we'd all be the richest people in the world. But you can fry in olive oil. And the reason that thing got started was because in the olden days they were using pure olive oil. They weren't using extra virgin. So pure olive oil, if you go down like the hierarchy of olive oils, there's extra virgin, virgin, then there's pure, then there's pumice. Pumice is what's used to make soap with. Pure is just one step above that. Very highly acidic. So that high acidic olive oil does not have a high smoke point. You cannot fry in it. That's correct. And I think that's what they were testing back then. I don't think they were like trying to be, sell another oil. I think that they were being honest. But if you check the extra virgin, it actually has a higher smoke point than some of the other olive oils. It's a little cost prohibitive because it's so expensive, but it's really delicious and it's better for you than the other one. So you can fry in it. Yes. Isn't it though? And pressing. So first cold pressed. That's when you're going to have the most nutrients, the most flavor. Whenever a bottle says first cold pressed, if they can back that up with a good, USDA organic kind of a symbol, or a California North American Olive Oil Council symbol, or one of the DOP, PDO, then you know that it's first cold pressed. It's going to be better, worth more money than just cold pressed. All virgin olive oils should be cold pressed. So that's not really, if it just says plain cold pressed, not a big deal. If it says first cold pressed, big deal, especially for nutrients and for health. Then what's really important, and what I know that you've learned today with Don Antonio, this week actually, was the importance of the leavening of the pizza. So there's a much different way that the body absorbs pizza, quote unquote pizza crust. If you have just a standard pizza crust that's not really done the proper way, or if you have the one that's done in the true authentic Neapolitan way. Because the authentic Neapolitan way has a lower, slower, longer rise, and it has a double rise. So as it rises, it actually makes the dough lighter. You're working with the same amount of product, but it becomes lighter. So those 270 to 300 grams are going to affect you much differently than if you just took a slab of dough and the same amount and let it rise for 15 minutes. This is more easily digested on the stomach. It has a lighter kind of a feel to it also. So when we get to a whole pizza and we look at it, we look at the nutritional aspects. So I think I've got, I think we put some of the samples at home. But basically half carbohydrates, 6% fat, 5.5% protein, and around 800 calories. That's what you're looking at with one of the standard pizzas like you all made today. So it's a meal in itself. It's a meal all in one, which is very important. We don't use that term a lot in America now, but in Italy they use it a lot, in Spain, and a lot of places that follow the Mediterranean lifestyle, they really use this terminology. It's important that plates, that dishes, recipes, make one meal that people can just go and eat all together. It's easy to analyze. It's something that completes you on the stomach. So you always hear that word a lot, that it's a meal in itself. And these are the components of that. So again, carbohydrates in the United States right now get a very bad rap. All carbohydrates are not created equal, and also people in Italy tend to eat a higher amount general per person in carbohydrates. But remember, healthiest people in Europe, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. So this is what a pizza will give us, in addition to all of those nutrients that I mentioned with the particular ingredients. So this is Crotone, which is in Calabria. This is where my family's from. And the reason I put this in here is because this is how I got started. I noticed that my family here, everybody has a twin in southern Italy. They all look the same. They all are the same, except they speak different languages. And the ones over here are much less healthy than the ones over there. And from a very young age, I wanted to know, why that was. Because obviously we have the same blood, we have the same genes, we look alike. What's making the difference? So food is part of it, but also the lifestyle. And the way, that's what I really wanted to capture. Because a lot of people can talk about food and ingredients, but not the lifestyle. And so this is important. So this is how we get into the Mediterranean diet. So when we talk about the Mediterranean diet, it's important to know that UNESCO just started protecting it actually as one of the cultural patrimonies of humanity. And last year, pizza was also put on the UNESCO list. So both pizza and the Mediterranean diet now, thankfully, are being protected by UNESCO as important parts of our culture. But if you look at the Mediterranean diet pyramid, this is done by Old Ways, which is I'm one of their culinary advisors for. But here you see the bottom tier is like people moving around and people eating together. So before we even start talking about food, nowadays we want to talk about who we're going to eat the food with. We're going to be in company, and that we're going to be getting a lot of physical exercise. Another benefit of the authentic pizza is that it creates a little bit of exercise to make it. Kneading the dough is work, right? Making the tomato sauce is work. And eating together. So, you know, in Italy they always say la pizza di sabato sera. So Saturday night, it's a tradition, right, Francesco? People go out together, they get together, they have pizza. Pizza in Italy is not the lonely food of the lonely, or the food because they're moving and they got the truck outside so they can't afford a real meal, or they can't afford the time of a real meal, so they're eating pizza. Pizza is something you look forward to, and you go out and it can be part of a celebration. So that aspect to me is very important in the Mediterranean lifestyle, because they've done a lot of research that when we sit down to a meal, if we smell the aromas, for example, before we actually eat it, we'll digest the food more slowly, we'll absorb more of the nutrients. If we eat with others, we'll digest the food better and we'll absorb more of the nutrients. So all of these little things that sometimes we don't have time for are really, really the important base before we even get into the actual ingredients. Then the second tier, which is the biggest tier, is plant-based foods. So according to the Mediterranean diet, according to the Mediterranean lifestyle, the majority of our meals and the foods that we eat every day should be from this plant-based group. So whether it's vegetables, fruit, nuts, seeds, legumes, olive oil, herbs, spices, everything in that plant-based food, that should be the majority of our diet every day. And of course, the pizza fits really well into that category. Then we have the fish and the seafood, which 2 to 3 times a week. They say you give yourself an additional serving of fish, 1 additional serving per week, you'll reduce your risk of heart disease by 49%. So you eat fish twice, eat it 3 times, that kind of thing. Then we go up to the dairy. So we have that important dairy group, which again with the pizza, we have the mozzarella, so it's taking care of that important factor. And then meats and sweets in the top, because they're what we're supposed to be eating the least of, just kind of like a luxury. But you know, getting back to the dairy, dairy really is an important staple in the Mediterranean lifestyle all over the Mediterranean, but especially in Italy, because in the ancient times, when people were farming and they were nomadic people and we were roaming the lands, you couldn't afford to slaughter an animal every day and have a roast or chicken or whatever for lunch or dinner. You could only keep those for special occasions. So the milk and the yogurt and the cheese was what people really sustained themselves on. So I'm very careful to point that out, because a lot of my colleagues nowadays in the Mediterranean diet world are downplaying the importance of cheese. But if you're not vegan, cheese can be a very delicious and important part of the diet. So getting back to the kind of the Italian attitude of eating the pizza together on sabato sera, they say chi mangia da solo si strozza in solitudine, which means if you eat alone, you strangle yourself in solitude. So it's like a good thing to take away. No matter what you eat, you want to eat together with others, you'll be kind of setting yourself up for success, pleasure, but also health. And I just wanted to leave you all with a couple things that my research on the Mediterranean diet, most of it is in this book that you can get over there. And if you want to come to Italy with me, you have to register by July 21st. I do culinary tours. And I thank you all for your attention, and I'll take questions if you have any questions.